Hi there, everybody. I'm Sharon Waxman. I'm the founder and the editor-in-chief of TheWrap, coming to you from our virtual Sundance film studio. I'm so delighted to welcome the talent behind an incredible film that's playing here at the festival. It's called Call Jane. Please welcome director Phyllis Nagy and the stars of the film, Elizabeth Banks, Sigourney Weaver, Wumi Masaku, and Grace Edwards. Welcome to all of you.
Hi, Sharon.
Hi, thank you for being here. Okay, we have a lot to talk about, people. Okay, so this is a movie, one of two movies here at Sundance that deal with a previously little known, probably, detail of women's history here in the United States, which is that there was kind of an underground women banding together to provide safe abortions when abortion was illegal before Roe v. Wade in 1973, and it was is loosely called Janes, the women who were involved with this, right? There is also, I'll just mention, a documentary that is called The Janes. We're going to be talking on another day here in the studio to the people behind that film. So it's pretty remarkable to have two films in the festival, kind of mirror images of this really interesting piece of American history. It may seem a bit obvious given the environment that we're in, but why don't you tell us why you picked this film? And how long ago, obviously, Roe v. Wade and the woman's right to choose is teetering and seems likely to actually go away.
Robbie Brenner, our producer, sent me the script, I think in January of 2020. Mm-hmm. And so I've been with it ever since. I think Elizabeth's been with it earlier than that, I think. And it spoke to me in a way that other scripts didn't, that were being sent to me at the time. Not just because it's about women, although I do have a vested interest in making films about strong and glorious women, but because it showed women in situations that we normally don't see them in. Mm-hmm. And taking journeys that we normally don't see them take. And the question of choice and this history of the Janes, which I knew little of when I started this. I know a lot more now. I felt these were things that needed spotlights on them. And it's become even more so since that time.
Right. Well, it's become more urgent. Elizabeth, you played the central character. Delighted to meet you. Huge fan of your body of work, acting, directing, everything that you've taken on. You're sort of the modern incarnation in real life of what Joy kind of did, your character, which is she sort of started in the background as a housewife, and then she grows incredibly into at first somebody who takes her own fate into her own hands because she has an illegal abortion and does not tell her very lovely husband that she's doing that. Then you continue to evolve and become an activist, actually, drawn into this network of women who are helping each other have safe abortions because abortions are illegal. So how did it feel to step back in time, something that we have taken for granted, this freedom to choose for decades now, and put yourself in the position of a woman who has to work surreptitiously, but go against the law, actually?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was drawn to many things about the story, not least of which that Joy is somebody who I think really finds her voice and comes into her own once she's sort of taken control of this very big decision in her life. But I really loved the celebration of women working together and the idea that when women join forces, that they can create a better future for themselves. I also really felt like this was very recent history, and I was born in 1974, so right before this, I have all my aunts and uncles and all those family members who, they didn't have these choices. And I think that choice is something that I feel is elusive in this moment in time in general for women. I've always felt like one of the reasons I wanted to get involved with this was because the women in the story, everything they cared about mattered, and they had real agency inside of this story. And I think we need to tell more of those. I loved that Phyllis had the same investment in it.
Well, the funny thing is, I grew up also after this right was already established. And, there's been also this movement of people to come forward and say whether they had abortions or not, and sort of bring it out of the shadows and take it out of this sort of shameful, secret place that it's lived. I among them. I'm amazed how many, I would say, privileged, educated women who have access to birth control still needed this right to be able to have the lives that they've lived. And so it was very moving to actually experience the story through your character and just try it on for size of what it feels like to not be a full-fledged citizen, with full-fledged ownership of your body and to you can't watch the film without sort of immediately putting yourself in the shoes of all the young women out there who are going to need that right and might not have it. So did that sort of like, I don't know if it weighed on you or if it was like informing your performance that what you're showing is what the future may be for women?
Well, of course you feel a responsibility when you're telling these kinds of stories. That being said, I really loved how ordinary the decision was and how clean and clearly Joy makes it. She's excited to stay alive. She values her life. She really values her life and her time with her daughter and her time with her husband. And
so in other words, just explain to viewers who haven't seen the movie yet, it's because she would have a life-threatening condition if she doesn't terminate the pregnancy, and you still are not able to get a waiver to get an abortion. Just explain. Okay.
Yes,
that is true. That is absolutely true. I mean, I think in the film, she has a 50% chance of surviving the pregnancy. Now, no man would ever be expected to take those odds, right? Half and half. But routinely women were. And I think Elizabeth is absolutely dead on, spot on when she talks about making this an ordinary decision, not something that, is about a woman's self-sacrifice. I mean, we've seen this trope time and time again. What this asks you to do is consider how important her life is as well, and how hard a decision and how heartbreaking it is. But yes, she wants to be there for her child, who is still a child. She's 15 years old. And the lack of help that women would get, even relatively privileged women like Joy Griffin. This is going on, as you say, Sharon, even now.
Yeah. So Sigourney, you play this really badass feminist who's leading this network of guerrilla abortion is what you want to call them. They're just like, it's really cool. Are you a composite character? Were you an actual character? Who are you based on in the film?
There were such extraordinary women who ended up being part of the Janes. I would say all of them. The actual first Jane, I think, was a college student. So I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that we wanted to show the great range of women who were brought together by caring about other women who were going through this, maybe because they had the experience themselves, or they had a friend or a relative who had been harmed by an illegal abortion or a self-induced abortion. So I think that the writers created this wonderful lifelong activist, Virginia, who's, I think, spent time in the trenches with a lot of, leftists, male leftists who for whom I think you see this in some of the films that have been done, where the women are always doing the office work and answering the phone and never given the right to speak. And so I think Virginia's pretty fed up with all of that. And finally, she finds something where, you know, not only she has agency, but agency is given to all the women.
May I ask, do you remember the moment when Roe v. Wade became the law of the land? And did you perceive a difference for you or your peers, your friends, in terms of how you felt about your own rights and whether it changed something material, kind of, I would say maybe even psychologically, if you weren't personally impacted by that decision? I mean, do you remember the shift in what it felt like?
It was earth shattering. You know, suddenly we were visible, and suddenly we were, you know, able to make our own decision about our own body. And it was, you know, we felt it was the beginning of many breakthroughs that women would have, and we have had those. And I would say the last thing in the world I ever expected was that we would ever think of going backward to those very sad, desperate days where women had to, you know, self-induce, and, you know, there were terrible things going on in these illegal abortions, heartbreaking things. So I never imagined we'd ever go back. And yes, it was like, I can breathe now. You know, I would say there were a lot of groups, support groups for women. It was a very activist time among students and all kinds of women right across the board, all working together. And so I think that we thought it works. We can get things done too. That was the other, you know, realization.
Well, I mean, talk a little bit about your character. You are part of the Jane Network, and you represent at a certain point what the experiences are for women of color that are even harder than the already hard circumstances for women who have, well, for those who are not women of color, like Joy, for example, who comes as in a character of means and a certain, you know, socioeconomic status, and you're there to represent. Well, what about women who can't afford abortions? What do we do about them? Can you talk a little bit about your character and how you approached it?
So I play Gwen, and yeah, she's the only woman of color in the Jane Collective when we first meet them, and yeah, there's this kind of tension between doing doing the I guess the work for you know, the feminist movement, and then there's the doing the work for you know, Black and brown and people who can't afford it. And so there's a lot of tension between people can't pay, and the people who can't pay don't get the abortions. And who are we here for? Are we here for all women, or are we just here for rich women or women with money or access?
Right.
So yeah, I think it's a turning point in the film, because they decide to like try harder. Try a little harder, reach a little further.
And is this also based on fact? I know obviously I'm sure there's license taken in the telling of the story, but
It's
sort of that tension that might have gone on internally.
It's based on fact, although it's a composite of various things. Once they learned how to do this themselves and had agency, they were able to take more women of color, more poor women. People would literally offer them $5 or, you know, whatever they had. And of course, you know, if women had $600, they'd pay $600.
Yeah.
But it really became a beautiful collective, really, in that moment.
Grace, you really represent, so you play Joy's daughter, teenage daughter in the film. And you, to me, in this group, represent future or the present that we're in, because of course what is changing in our society is going to impact your generation more than say mine, for sure, and and my daughters, so how did that kind of galvanize anything in your performance and being in this film?
I was born in a time where I do have a choice. I was not born in a time where it was hush hush and you couldn't talk about it. So I think it's important for people of my generation to see the film and be aware of the history of what these women went through and what they did for our generation.
Yeah, that's very well put. Well, I'm sorry that we're out of time because I obviously want to take all of you to dinner and just talk about the film for a couple of hours. But I will talk about it with my friends, so that's worth anything. But Phyllis and Sigourney and Elizabeth and Wami and Grace, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for this film. I think that it's going to be very widely seen and discussed, and let's hope that it has some impact on the debate that we are all experiencing in our society. But great work. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sharon.
Thank
Take
you.
care.